Hi everyone and welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and that bin that you see on the second shelf down there with the round sticker on it, I'm going to be going into that bin today to feed it. It's a 46-day-old African nightcrawler bin, and it's already received 6 feedings till now, putting it on average of getting a feeding every 7 or 8 days over those past 46 days. And for a 46-day-old container, it's coming along pretty good, but I'm going to be doing something in that bin today, something that I normally don't do in a 46-day-old container, and that's going to be try to haul out some of the adult worms that occupy that container and get them situated. If you see me holding a sticker in my hand and a empty plastic container, you can usually guess I'm preparing to launch off a new worm bin. And the whole idea behind that was to get the adult worms out of that system out of there so that they can be pretty much separated from the baby worms that occupy the bin. So it would normally be pretty unusual for me to even think about removing worms from a bin that's only 46 days old. Normally we'd be doing something like what we see right now in my old ANC container, my other African nightcrawler box, where that thing had received 15 feedings, and then a good period of time just to forage over 155 days, and that 9 days ago we finally started trying to lure the worms out of the material over there, all of them, to get them relocated at some point. So it would probably be at 170 something days before any worms are removed from this system over here. But here we're going to be getting the adult worms out of there because apparently, and I never knew this up until just now, that the size of a worm could be dictated by how many baby worms it occupies its space with. So if there's a lot of baby worms zipping around the bin, from what I understand now, adult worms can end up not growing as large as they would be if they weren't surrounded by baby worms. So really interesting thing, something that I've actually seen tested now on another worm channel too, so I'm kind of just following in the wake of what's happening over on the World Composting channel, where a similar test is being done to, extract the adult worms from an African nightcrawler system so as to keep them separated and hopefully as a result observe their size remain nice and large. So that's kind of what my game plan is here today for this 46-day-old African nightcrawler system. I'm thinking we go in there, we feed, also pull out some nice bedding that would go along with the worms into their new home so that they can occupy some familiar material once they get into their new home, and then we'll go ahead and we'll launch off that new bin in the green box with the adult worms that we've collected. So let's get to work. So at some point we'll put this sticker on here, but only after the worms have been introduced. For now, all we're going to do is work on getting this thing set up, ready for worm occupation. And I'm excited to use some stuff that's right over here in this container. It's a bunch of something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, which is some pre-made bedding materials. So it's all kinds of leaves and cardboard and a whole bunch of stuff that's been shredded up in the new shredder that I just got, which results in really, really nice, tiny little pieces of shredded paper as opposed to what I'm used to seeing, which is these fairly large chunks of paper that used to come out of my old shredder. So got some nice materials to use. I'll use some of my old kind of not yet aged or broken in, fresh sterile bedding at the bottom. We'll lay in some of this slightly aged material, and then at some point we'll be bringing the worms in with a little bit of their own native material that they're occupying now in their old home. So let's get this thing built up really quick so we've got somewhere to put these little guys once we're ready to relocate them. So one of the things I like to do sometimes is take these rolls, these cardboard tubes that the toilet paper or the paper towels are on, and lay them out sort of like a foundation for my bins. Seems like if I build these little tunnels, there's going to be a lot more opportunity for good airflow down low within the bin underneath everything else. You know, even though I've got a nice new shredder creating nice fresh little pieces like this. I've got a pretty good amount of this older paper that I shredded with the old device, and I'm going to just keep trying to use this stuff up over time eventually to do away with this as well. Even though I think that this finer cut new stuff is far superior. So I gotta make some more. I can't believe I used it all up already. I guess it's when I was setting up this container of, pre-built stuff. I did use quite a bit of it in here. So now let's see. Another thing to put in here is going to be leaves, another good carbon-rich bedding material. A lot of people use shredded paper, a lot of people use leaves, some people use coco coir or peat moss, or I think even, cow manure. There's so many different things you could use as bedding in your worm bins. And when you put in a lot of stuff like this, some fairly dry material, it's going to need to get hydrated. It's going to need moisture, and my aged bedding material is damp, but all this stuff was dry, so I wanted to throw a little water down into the bottom of the container before we put any of this nice wet stuff in on top. So let's grab a couple handfuls of this. This is already kind of combined all those materials that we saw before. Finely shredded paper, leaves, and the one nice thing about this aged stuff is that it already had some finished vermicompost added into it as well, so that those beneficial microbes and bacteria and fungi and everything that normally live in a bin and really help with the breakdown process are hopefully already now present within this more damp material that we just laid in on top. So I don't want to go overboard. I'm not sure how many worms we're going to be able to recruit for this. So I didn't want to build too big of a bin. That's why I'm starting in this small container here. But for now, this is a pretty good start, I think. So let's set this aside, and when the time comes to put the worms in here, we'll know that we're all set to go. So here in this tray, we've got the feeding. There's some cucumber and some potato peels. This is some green beans, it's kind of frozen together, a chunk of them. Same thing here, a chunk of frozen melon peels. This is watermelon, and this is cantaloupe melon. Here we've got the outer rinds of a number of pieces of cantaloupe melon. So this is a pretty good size feeding, and right below it, over here, is the bin. 46-day-old bin, covered in plastic, as I usually do in my newer bins, to help keep the moisture from all being lost. But as time goes on, I'll start to feel more and more confident that the material that's in the bin, basically at that point, hopefully a greater concentration of castings, more castings than bedding, and then I'll be able to trust that the castings can hang on to the moisture on their own without any help. But until such a time, I like to use the plastic just to make sure I'm keeping the moisture down within the bin as best I can. I've got this plastic tray that we can collect all of our worms into. So I guess the idea here would be that you got to identify the worm as a adult. And the only other consideration that I'm taking here is the possibility that this bin may have gotten invaded by Indian blue worms. And if I do spot any of those, then I would definitely want to remove them from the system. So I'm not sure what I'm seeing here, if these are juvenile African nightcrawlers, or could they be some of the blue worms that might have snuck into here? It's so hard to say. I wish I was better at identifying worm types. Because if these are African nightcrawlers, one of them I could clearly see the clitellamon, telling me it's probably of breeding age and old enough to be kept with the adults versus being treated as a juvenile. I mean, they're both pretty good size. Maybe I should just put them both over, give them both the benefit of the doubt that they're in fact night crawlers, and include them in our relocation. Because, wow, that was a big worm. I tried to grab it and the sucker just pulled away from me effortlessly. like I had nothing on it at all. It just took off. And it was a big fat worm. I was just hoping to get that guy out here as a specimen to compare these couple worms to. But at this point, I know that the population of worms that I was given here were a mix of adult worms and a lot of cocoons and baby worms too. So when I go looking through this bin, I'm not expecting to see all adult worms. I am kind of expecting to already see some babies beginning to emerge, or some juveniles beginning to grow to age, being a little bit older. And this little guy is pretty stuck in this piece of cardboard, snuck out of reach. That little guy seemed like a small enough one that I would probably consider it as juvenile and leave it behind. But I've been pretty much grabbing every one that I can lay my hands on and have been pulling them out. Originally I thought to myself, oh, it should be easy enough just to count, keep track of how many worms I've extracted. Sometimes we play a little bit of a guessing game to see how many worms we've succeeded in relocating from one bin to another. Here we could actually be counting them, but I've not counted. I just started putting them over into the collection tray, so I don't even know how many I've got so far. I guess I could always play the video back in the end. And then I'll come up with my own guess, but like I like to do sometimes, or pretty much every time nowadays, is to really base my estimate of the population on what the viewers believe they saw me bring over. And a lot of times it's just a pile of worms. A lot of times there's so much stuff commingled in the material that the worms are occupying that it's really even tough to see them at all. So I always definitely appreciate everyone's estimates when they kick them in, so that I can actually end up with an averaged estimated worm count for each of my newest bins, which is based really on everyone's feedback in terms of how many worms they think they observed in the migration or the launch that I was doing on the video. So we're going to be doing that here too. Once that sticker goes on and it's a new bin, I'll be entering it into my spreadsheet, and I'll need some sort of guesstimate for how many worms were used to launch the system off. So I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on that. Please place a comment down below and let me know how many worms you think we've collected here today. And I'm just wondering how I could do this in such a way that it just doesn't become monotonous and boring for someone to watch. Maybe I'll put some fast traveling music in as a audio underlay for some fast playback, fast motion of what I'm doing here. But I don't want to not show anything. I want everyone to see everything I'm doing, so that I can get some really good estimates on how many worms we collected here today. Feels to me like I've gone through this pretty thoroughly, and I really don't even know how much time I've spent on this. It feels like a good 10 minutes, pretty much combing through the entire batch of material, upturning pretty much every square inch of it to try to find as many adult worms as I could. So I'm really curious to see what everyone comes back with as far as an estimate for what we collected here, and obviously what we're deducting from here as well. So I'll update the 500 population estimate of this to deduct the you know, the worms that we just extracted. So let's get the food in here, and a little bit of bedding too. I've just used up the last of my nice finely shredded stuff, so I got to collect some cardboard and paper to get another batch of shredding going on. And I got to tell you, using the new shredder is like actually fun. It's so cool, you know. I mean, I took a whole stack of newspapers, all the circulars from all the local supermarkets for the past couple weeks, and usually it takes me with the old shredder to make this large stuff. It would take me quite a long time, and with the new one it took me just minutes to come up with much finer finished product too, so it was pretty awesome. Let's see, we had this piece of paper here too, a soiled napkin to go along with the feeding as supplementary bedding and carbon food for them. I'll try to chunk it up into a few smaller pieces, spread it around, and then we could just dump in that entire feeding. It's a pretty good amount of stuff, kind of making me wonder, is it too much? I don't know what kind of a population we're left with in here. But gotta remember, when I got this stuff from Northeast Worms, I was told that besides adult worms, there was also a whole bunch of cocoons and juvenile worms included as well. So they wouldn't be as obvious, but they were indications to me that the population of the bin would just naturally on its own grow. I'm pretty confident that the content of this is still pretty rich in life and has a good appetite. So let's, I'm just debating on whether I really want to use all this stuff up. Do I really want to use so much food? We might be good with just a fraction of it, I think. I don't know. I'm really torn at this point. So far it's all good stuff that they're probably going to just rip to shreds anyway, stuff that they really like. Kinds of yummy little this and that's. Just using my clean hand here for some stuff that hopefully is really just water in the end. And this almost seems like, I don't know why, just based on us removing worms from the population, it felt like we should maybe scale back their feeding too. Yeah, I don't know what to do. I'm so tempted just to give them a little bit more. Certainly not everything that I've got here. At least half of it's going back, I think, to the refrigerator. You know what, just for variety's sake, just so I can satisfy my curiosity of what was in this bag actually. So yeah, it's potato peels and chunks of cucumber. All in all, a really awesome feeding that the worms are probably going to be able to rip through pretty quickly. Some foods take a while, take the worms a little while to consume, but other foods they're able to rip through really quickly. It's probably got something to do with the rate at which the bacteria and fungi and everything else is able to infiltrate the food and help start breaking it down as quickly as possible so the worms can tag team with them. So there's not much left to do in this one other than get things covered up. Just wonder if I'm forgetting anything. I guess we could have probably added grit, but I didn't bring the grit out onto the table, and it's not necessary every go around either, so it's certainly not a problem. There's probably good amounts of grit in here from previous feedings that the worms can use if they need it. So we'll skip the addition of grit today. One thing we could do though, since I've got my box of leaves right here, we could give this whole bin a nice top sprinkling of fresh leaves before we put it away. Let's do that. Save a little bit. I want to tap myself out, although I did pretty much use the better part of that box over the past couple days, so it went pretty quick. And that looks pretty good. I think we had this plastic covering directly on the material, and as a result it gets covered with castings and food and bedding debris that sticks to it because it's wet. Sometimes I lay down a piece of newspaper as a top cover, but since it wasn't here already and we don't already have one, we'll just stick with what we had, and we'll just go with just the covering right on top of the material. Sometimes I like to have a piece of paper there, but since I don't have that ready either on the ready, we're going to skip that as well. So it's really just down to recruiting worms out of the system and filling the void with some fresh food for who remains and who's to come. So, all right, let's get this thing out of here and bring back the new bin that we're launching off today. So, bringing back the new bin, it's just sitting here right on top of the ready-made bedding container. So I think that actually gives it a nice height so that we can have it up close and personal right there in front of the camera for everyone to see. Because once again, I'm just going to reiterate how I really appreciate everybody kicking in their suggestions, giving me their estimates for how many worms they think they see in my systems every time I do one of these releases. So this will be our last chance to see how many worms we're launching this new adult bin off with. And then once we're done, we'll put on the sticker and it'll be official. We'll have ourselves another African nightcrawler system. So let's get these little guys situated in their new home. Okay, yep, got them all. Good job. Definitely seems like we've got ourselves a good number of worms here. So please, in your comment down below, please provide me your guess with how many worms you think we've got in here. And then we'll take a moment or two just to observe them getting situated in their new home. These are African nightcrawlers, pretty tolerant of bright lights. So if it was red wigglers or some other type of worm, they'd probably be diving down pretty quick, but these guys don't seem to mind, so we'll see what happens over the next few minutes. So I'm going to leave them be and we'll check back in a minute. At this point, I really don't even know how much time has passed. 10 minutes at least, I would think. So just pushing aside the other container so this can come back down and rest on the bench so we can get things covered up and get things finished off. So I've got newspaper here. This is just folded in half, so this is 2 layers. This is also just folded in half, slightly smaller, also covering 2 layers of paper. And I've got a plastic shopping bag or a plastic produce bag folded in half as well, allowing for a good amount of airflow around the edges, but also providing a fair bit of moisture capture with this plastic and not allowing for stuff to evaporate, at least through there. So I think this is a pretty good fresh start to a nice new bin. Over here we've got a crack, so I think it's going to be over on this side of the container where we're going to go ahead and apply the sticker christening the bin officially as one of my active worm bins with today's date. And the tiny sticker is just an indicator that this is a temporary arrangement. They'll get moved into a bigger location soon. So help me welcome my newest African nightcrawler container. And that's it. So before I go, let me really quickly say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember, give me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching.